Welcome to First Person, the show where we meet the most interesting people in IT and learn from them what makes them tick by focusing only on their firsts. I'm your host, Matt Egan, asking you to enjoy, to like, and subscribe wherever you find us. And if you are an interesting person in IT, please do let us know. You might be the next first person. The next voice you hear will be today's guest. She is Dr. CJ Meadows. CJ is Head of Innovation, Executive Education Designer, a professor, and Head of MBA Consulting for the SB Jain School of Global Management, as well as the Executive Chairperson of the Tiger Centre. As you can tell from that, she has a storied and varied career, is absolutely one of the most interesting people in IT, and we are delighted to have her as a guest on First Person. So, CJ, welcome. And first up, what is the first thing people should know about you?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here today. And what to know about me? Most important to me, I am the mom of four amazing kids from Vietnam, Philippines, Singapore, and Malaysia.
Wow.
Uh, to relax from that, I like to feed and photograph sharks.
Huh?
And I think I think when we were talking earlier, you wanted it to kind of like the 2-minute recap of
Yes.
a 25 or 30-year career. So here it goes. I trained as an accountant, CPA, CMA, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So did I work in that? Nah, it's not. I went into I so I worked for Accenture in IT building systems, and afterwards decided, no, I want to go into academia. So I got a doctorate in business administration from Harvard Business School, having taken a foray into teaching English in Japan, living with dear friends, a family. After that, I did go into academia for all of a year. I couldn't take the bureaucracy. Oh my God. So I did go back into consulting, but I founded firms and then later went to Accenture strategy, and it was the e-commerce days. We had just coined that term, loved it, and, went to a boutique and all that sort of stuff. Then dot-com crash happened. Not the first time I was thrown out of work. I can tell you about the first time if you wish. And became an entrepreneur for like 15, 20 years and decided, I'm gonna go back into academe. I think I've learned some things that I really should share. And now I do a whole bunch of weird stuff, and you're welcome to hear about it all.
All right, that's awesome, and thank you so much for giving us that wonderful potted history. That's done a certain amount of my job for us, which is very relieving. Intrigued by so many things to unpick there. I can definitely, as a parent of only two children from only one country, I can definitely see how photographing sharks would be the relaxing side of that piece. And on this show, we really love to meet people who have had interested and varied routes and careers because we tend to find that that's where we learn the most things. So very excited to dig into some of the things you covered off there. And let's start in our first section, which we call First Things First. And this is where we get to know about our guest by understanding some of their first times. And CJ, you hit on this a little bit before, but I am intrigued as to, you've done your qualification in accountancy. I can understand why you might not want to go and work in accountancy. But then tell us a little bit about that first job in IT and what took you in that direction.
Well, first of all, at the time, it was Arthur Anderson and Company, an accounting firm,
Yeah, yeah.
but they were interviewing for their consulting arm, which later became Accenture. And I thought, ooh, tech. This is cool. I bought my first computer in like 1983. It was like DOS 3.1. And I thought, yeah, that tech is going to be a rising tide throughout my lifetime and beyond. So I better get on the tide.
Yeah.
So I went for it. And amazingly, they sent me out to United Airlines, the Defense Department, all kinds of crazy places, Washington, D.C. It was a great time to be there, and they taught us pretty much, what we needed to do. As a matter of fact, we took in French majors, English majors. You didn't have to be a computer scientist because they're
Yes.
like, look, we need people who can think.
Yeah.
We'll teach you what we want you to do, but we got to know that you can think. And today we're moving back towards that sort of a model.
Big time. Yeah, it's really interesting, I think. Funny enough, I was talking to a CEO yesterday who was saying exactly the same thing, that in his recruitment, he is increasingly always looking for exactly that. He said, it's not about skills so much, but it's not even necessarily about skills experience. It's about he wants people who can think and have conversations with him about what the next products and services might be, right? And it's very interesting to hear you talk about a period of time where, and I think we're there again now, which I think you just hinted at, where going into technology didn't necessarily mean you had experience or qualifications in technology. It meant you were, I guess, kind of open to possibility and maybe happy to work and live with some level of lack of certainty. I mean, were they things that kind of it seems that you were inspired by the opportunity to create maybe as well.
Absolutely, absolutely, and, I've done some research and some writing into what will work be like and what will education be like in this new age of work and Gen AI, and, I made this framework of skills and such and attributes. What should we what should you be looking for and building in your new business people? And most of it turned in out being in this being bubble of intrapersonal and interpersonal skills.
Right.
And some of the thinking is going to be taken over by machines. Some of the doing is certainly taken over by machines. And then afterwards I realized, oh, duh, if machines are taking over all that stuff, we need to develop ourselves as humans, as thinking, creative humans, and get a handle on exactly what that is. And we're only
Mhm.
coming to grips with that now.
Yeah, if just barely actually. And I think again, one of the
Ugh.
interesting things about my conversation yesterday, not to harp on that, but was talking about how I've worked in media, in technology media for 25 years now, and I cannot tell you how many times I've met brilliant technology people who've built things that work in amazing ways but don't solve problems, right? And that's it's heartbreaking. And I also cannot tell you the number of brilliant people I've met who, in some ways, it's hard to define exactly what it is that makes them brilliant, but it's because they're able to exist in this conceptual world, and be really open minded about what the future might bring, and think about solutions. Because to your point, the toil might be done by the machine, right? The actual building and doing might be done by the machine, but as human beings, like identifying what makes things better, what is the solution. It's almost a philosophical challenge, but it's kind of where I think a lot of the future might lie in terms of work. And I guess from your perspective, you're working in IT for Arthur Anderson, where interestingly, my sister also worked as an accountant one many years ago. But you move from that to other things, including consultancy and some level of teaching. That's quite interesting, right? That suggests to me that you're getting your motivation, and the thing that's exciting you is that more kind of conceptual, open-minded approach maybe to what the future can bring?
It's either that or I can't hold down a job. I'm
Yeah.
really willing to run with either one. I'm fine
Sure.
with that. I mean, basically, I've worked in business, government, academe, entrepreneurship, and not for profit. And the first time I went into each one of those, I learned something really, really new. Like the first time I went into business, was out of my accounting undergrad, and lo and behold, here I am in the business world. And what I learned there was, oh my gosh, I thought the rules were you get an assignment, you do it perfectly, you give it back on time. Ta da! I'm
Yeah.
going to be a great employee. No, business is very, very social.
Yeah.
And back to your point, so much of what we're going to be doing is what I'm working with MBAs and executives with right now with design thinking. We
Yeah.
need to go out and find needs and wants in unstructured situations.
Mhm.
Then we get the tech to help, but that's a very human skill. So that
Yeah.
in government, I was kind of surprised. I thought, okay, all bureaucracy, all rules. No, again, very, very
Yeah.
human. And it was Defense Department. So there's a lot of solidarity and teammanship.
Yeah.
Um, Academe, I was surprised that it was so schizoid. Because, the thing that brings in the money is people pay for you to teach them. But what you get promoted on in traditional academic organizations is your research, for which there is no profit. So I'm like, how does this work as a business? I mean, you're like, you don't want your people to do the money making thing, and you want them to do the stuff that doesn't make money. I'm like, I don't get it. But anyway, entrepreneurship. It was a thing. Most of us in tech get shiny tech syndrome. Okay, we get so excited about all the possibilities, and so do
Yeah,
entrepreneurs, and the way the world should be, and the way that we should work. I, and nobody cares. They
yeah,
really, really don't. They have problems today. They want you to solve their problems. So
yeah,
that's what you need to be doing in entrepreneurship. And then not for profit, thing that stunned me that I learned was, wow, people will work for free? I like, whoa. I thought, you got to pay them, you got to give them career progression or whatever it is, perks you got to give them to get them out there. No, people are already motivated. They care. They want to do something meaningful, and they will move heaven and earth if you will help them do that.
yeah. Absolutely. I mean, and so many interesting, learnings from that. Like, I feel, your point about government has been my experience too, which is it's social, but also like whenever you're dealing with policy, um, the intention there is almost to not circumvent, but go through existing bureaucracy and rules, like to get to an
Mhm.
outcome kind of thing. And
Exactly.
I'm
And you're
fascinated
surrounded by people
hearing.
who want to break through.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and have the motivation to your point about the not for profit. And really interesting to hear you talk about your MBA teaching practice because, like, I think we've all experienced people who are not. I'm not going to use the word bad, but like whom have been very, very well educated in business, and what that means is they're able to exactly as you described from academia, right? Um, Take an assignment, fulfill it, get a tick in the box, get a great appraisal, but actually the business isn't developing right because actually what's required is that kind of more design thinking approach, which is what are the problems we're going to solve here. And I feel like that, it does sound like, and this does not surprise me from speaking to you, but it does sound like your teaching is kind of much more aimed at how we move things forward. And in order to have
Well,
this kind of career, go on.
and if I could build on that, one of the big things that I learned when I started consulting was, yeah, somebody's going to give you an assignment. It's a dumb thing to do. Go back to them and say, we shouldn't be doing this. I think we really ought to be doing that. And they're going to thank you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Whereas
yeah,
in school, everything's been worked out and everybody knows what
yeah.
should happen in their program. But in business, that's not the case. So you've got to lead up and manage up.
Well, it's the difference between leadership and management, right? And
Yeah.
anybody at any level can lead, but you have to be having those thoughts. And that's a good segue actually, because in order to have the kind of career that you've had, you have to have had people along the way who've helped facilitate, you to kind of move in the directions you want to move in. And I'm just wondering if you've got any examples of your first great boss is the question we ask. But it doesn't have to be a boss, right? It's people you've worked with who've kind of helped inspire, support, steer you in the right direction.
Absolutely. There's actually 2 of them, and they were kind of at the same time at Harvard, where I was not only getting my doctorate, but I was also a research assistant and so forth. So I was working there. And one boss was the head of the division of research and the head of the IT group, and he could see trends and where IT as a field was going. And he's the one who kind of guided me into something that everybody told me, "You're doing what? Where? That's not gonna take off." It was Indian IT outsourcing, and it's done pretty well. And
Yeah.
the thing that I got really excited about was this is a beautiful example of what I think we can all do with global IT and telecommunication systems now. We can globalize services. We have virtual teams worldwide all together at the same time. And again, shiny tech syndrome. Did anybody want to do that in the early 90s? No. No, I had to wait 25 years, and then COVID came along, and then everybody
Yeah,
was on virtual teams, and I just
yeah,
pulled out the old stuff and said, "Oh, here's how you can manage some of your teams."
yeah. Yeah, shiny tech syndrome, which I think will be the title of this episode. But no, you're so right. I mean, when we've been writing and creating content and sharing advice and insights about digital transformation for 20 years, and then it happened overnight because of COVID. And I remember speaking to, I won't say who it was, but the CSO of a huge multinational organization who was talking about having to unplug desktop computers from the wall and hand them to staff to take home with them in March 2020. Because like to your point, like moving towards the shiny new tech is can be the thing, whereas actually what the organization might need maybe just more about more of a philosophical transition into the way of approach. And now here we are. We haven't figured it out fully, hybrid, remote, international. But I do think like that genie is not going back in that particular box, right? We're moving forward in
It's not.
these new ways of working.
And I almost forgot the other person that I wanted to share with
Yeah.
you. He was like the co-head of the IT area, and I got very, very sick when I was there. I had Epstein-Barr syndrome,
Oh wow.
and yeah, so at the 6-month mark, they were going to declare it chronic fatigue syndrome and put me on welfare, and I was going to, just be on welfare for the rest of my
Mm.
life. I want, and that was the boss who had such a big heart. He was like, "Look, do what you can when you're up to it. If you're not, never mind. Just take care of you. We're in this for the long haul."
Mhm.
And I so, so appreciated that heartfelt approach that, he and the institution have had my loyalty ever since.
Right. It would have been paid back myriad times, it's interesting because that relates back to the previous point you made about, remote teams and remote working and the future of work. I was talking to another senior executive yesterday about how like the idea of having a limited number of days off is just wildly outmoded, right? Because, for most of us in the knowledge industries, work is a thing you do, right? And it's responsibilities and it's output and outcomes. It's not time spent and places where you are. And how, all the studies show that if you give people more flexibility and freedom and support, they do more anyway, right? Like from a purely kind of naked economic approach, like giving that kind of so that's an extreme example, and your boss sounds amazing. But it's not only the right thing to do; it's the right thing to do. Like talent is so hard to come by, and just giving that level of support. Because even when you were ill and unable to work, I'm sure you were desperate and keen to add value. Why wouldn't you support and invest in that? It's a very enlightened and great thing to hear, but it's also the right thing to do from a business perspective, in my opinion. So that's all been too good and too happy and bright and shiny, though. So we're going to move on to section two, which is our section we call first fails. And you know what? You've already trailed it, and so I'm intrigued to get to this story. You said you'd be happy to share with us the first time you were thrown out of work. And honestly, CJ, I really want to hear that story at this point.
So I'd been with Accenture for like 4 years. So I'm 25 years old, success after success and, doing all kinds of cool stuff. Yay, yay. And then the Defense Department budget cuts
Ah,
happened. And I was in the Washington, D.C. office. So about 550 of us had to be let go. Um, and I always wondered if I was really, really good at what I did, maybe I wouldn't be let go. But
right.
then again, uh, there's like 550 other people. So I'm like not in bad company.
Yeah.
And, the partner who fired me, he sat down with me and he like drew a little uh, graphic on the whiteboard. Nobody could have a meeting back then without a whiteboard and a marker. And if you have the marker, you're leading the discussion. And he drew like three circles, little, big, and bigger. And he said, like this little circle, this is us, and you've been working here. This is cool. And this little bigger circle is the industry. This is IT or consulting, whatever you want to say. And then this big one is life. And even if you're not going to be in this little tiny circle anymore, you could be in the bigger circle. You've got to be in the great big circle.
Yeah.
There's so much more out there for you, and that was so true. Little did he know I had already applied for school,
That's
but
good.
I had about 6 months before I was gonna find out anything, and so I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna go for the big circle," and I went to Japan and taught English and lived with a family, and it
Amazing.
was fabulous. And if anybody has a chance to go on a sabbatical, do.
Yeah.
You will come out a different person.
I always think, I mean, because, we know in IT, this is a huge thing at the minute. Um, it's important not to sort of downplay the impacts that that can have on somebody. And hey, you were 25, right? You were already thinking about other things. If you're 45, and it can be a more devastating experience. But I think the same principles do apply, right? Which is we do get um, we do get kind of hemmed into the small circle, and we think this is it. This is where we are. We also think, to your point, like our personal performance safeguards us against the sort of vagaries of economics, and they just don't. Like they just don't. Um, and actually being able to see that bigger circle, I literally don't know of anybody who hasn't found that beneficial. Albeit, again, I do not want to denigrate or downplay the trauma that you can have from that moment happening to you. But great that it was kind of a learning experience, and a positive experience for you. One of the things we do like to sort of think about in these conversations is that I genuinely believe you learn more from failures and hard times than you do from success. And it was interesting. Then you spoke about, I think we've all had that experience. I'm 25, I'm flying, I've figured it out, kind of thing. And then, so I wonder if there was a time when you realized that something you thought you knew, might actually not be true and might be wrong. And if there's any learning experiences like that you've had along the way.
You know, I I've thought a lot about that. And there's two big crashes that were really big crashes for me. The one where I really questioned, I think maybe I screwed up a lot, uh,
Mhm.
was I was an entrepreneur and I thought, okay, let's do some risk management here. All right. Let's set up businesses in different industries, in different currencies, on different continents. All right. Pretty good diversified portfolio. And then what happened? The Lehman's crisis.
Right.
And we're like, that was every industry, every currency worldwide. Even banks didn't have money to fill their contracts. So I'm like, okay, I think maybe I overextended. But then again, no matter what I did,
Yeah.
I was stuffed.
The world
Um,
overextended, right? As you were saying that, I was thinking of when you talked about diversification bringing, um,
mhm,
resilience, even as you were saying that, I was thinking back to that period, right, where we were all obsessed with the
yeah,
idea that, and even within
yeah,
the toxic assets that caused the whole problem, like the belief
uh-huh.
was, that, if we had a mixture of, but the problem is if there's toxicity in there, it just means what you're going to do is exponentially spread the risk, not mitigate for it, which was kind of a learning for us all. I mean, it's a really important learning for us all, and also speaks back to
And
when you were speaking earlier about, academia. You get given a thing to do, you do it, and that's fine, right? You didn't do anything. You did it by the book. You did it all right, but actually, there was a bigger kind of thing.
and Sorry, the thing I was gonna pop in with, it's gone. So,
Ah, that's my bad
feel free to
interviewer.
move on. Sorry, sorry.
Well, I think we've probably covered a lot of ground there, and I really appreciate some fascinating insights. But it's been too serious and too insightful and useful. So now I want to ask some silly questions, if that's all right. So we're going to move on to section three, which we call quick fire firsts. And in this section, this is where we get beyond your professional veneer. We want to find out about the real person using our patented random question generator. So CJ, I would ask you to pick a number between 1 and 13, please.
5.
5. Ah, okay. This is quite a philosophical question, and it's okay if you don't have an answer for it, but I wonder if you have a first memory?
A first memory.
Hmm. I can tell you mine if that's helpful. We were on vacation on holiday on the south coast of England, which was a big deal for us because we never really left the local environs where I grew up in the north of England. And I have a really vivid memory of this sandy yellow hotel that we stayed in Devon. That's it. I don't know now if that's just because I told people about that memory as a child that I've reimagined,
Uh-huh,
which is how the weird thing is, but
uh-huh, uh-huh.
it's got a Proustian thing, right? I can really feel like I'm the middle child, right? I'm a cosseted middle child surrounded by family and everything's fine. That's that's my first memory.
I think mine was probably when I was about 3, and, my mother had gone off to the store. My sister, who was, like, 5.5 years older, she was like, mom was like, "Hey, can you watch her for just a few minutes? I'm just gonna nip to the store and come back." And the moment my mother was gone, I was absolutely inconsolable. The
Yeah.
screaming, crying, the fit, "She's gone." There's my world that I could hold on to that was rock solid was gone.
Hmm.
And of course, like, after a few minutes, came back and said, "Oh, everything okay?" And
Yeah.
then my sister looked like one of those little hamsters in that poster with the hair sticking up saying, "Having a hard day?"
those those minutes seeming like the absolute lifetime to her. Wow, amazing. We always get something good from that question. Go on then, CJ, pick one more number, and I promise you this one will be less kind of deep and philosophical. I hope so anyway.
Ooh, let's go for 8.
Number 8 is okay. This is way more venal. What was the first time you earned any money doing anything?
Oh, easy peasy. I was hired as a secretary when I was 13.
There you go.
Our next our next door neighbor was she worked for a school supply company selling school supplies all around the state, and she would, travel and get all the stuff out and take in the orders and everything. And, I would go into her house or her garage and say, "Oh my God, you're disorganized. You really need to file some of this." And she's like, "Hmm, do you want a job?"
Yeah, I love that.
So I helped her on marketing campaigns and did filing, and I earned a whole $1.35 an hour.
It is. I tell you what, though, it's amazing the number of people we interview who are super successful, who have had a similar sort of experience of like what seems like very early entry to the world of work, and I think it does speak somewhat. I mean, the fact is, you noticed the mess and you suggested there was a solution, right? Not every 13-year-old is doing that. And don't those first dollars you earn feel sweet, sweet dollars, right? If only I could go back to that moment again, that would feel good. Thank you so much, CJ. Okay, we're going to move on now to our final section where we're going to get really deep and philosophical. Okay, we call this our first and final thoughts, and I'm excited to ask you this question. What would be the first piece of advice you would give to someone who is starting out right now?
I would give them actually a quote from St. Catherine of Siena, who I finished my first innovation book with this quote, which I think is very important for our future of work and anyone's personal future, because we all have a very different design. Be who you God meant you to be, and you will
Mhm.
set the world on fire.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaks to a great truth, right? Like, and I do think and we've hit on this a little bit before as well, but it's like the path that's laid out, the conventional path, probably isn't right for anybody, right? And following your passions and being open to new experiences and being curious is the best advice for anybody, right? But that can be difficult to see when you're right at the beginning, when it's like get this qualification, get this kind of job, move there, move here, So it's excellent advice for everybody, I would think. Okay. What about because you've done so many things? It's interesting to start an answer that says, "Here's a quote from Catherine of Siena that I used in my first innovation book." Right? Not everybody gets to use that sentence, but taking it all in, what's and sometimes it would surprise people, I think. But what's the first project or achievement that you would want to tell people about? What do you consider to be your masterpiece, your finest hour?
My masterpiece, as a person who's been working pretty continually since, like, age 13 until I'm not telling you how old I am now, but anyway, it's
I'm
way
gonna
older
laugh.
than 13. Um, I've worked and worked and worked and worked and worked and worked. But I would consider my masterpiece my family. These beautiful 4 kids and an adopted brother and, a husband of over 30 years and our helper who's been with us. I hired her almost 30 years ago as well. And we've all managed together to stay together through thick and thin. And that's also another thing that's correlated with success. The same skills that you develop in long-term relationships help you with long-term successful ventures or long-term success of any kind.
Yeah, amen to that. No, I think it's the right answer, right? It has to be like whatever your chosen uh, organism is, your family. For me, is my wife of we've been together 26 years, and our
Oh, yeah.
children, and uh, and and figuring it out, right? Compromise, collaboration, leadership, support. They're all parts of that unit, and everyone's got different family units. And I'm certainly not imposing my own kind of more traditional sort of approach onto things. But I do think there's a lot of wisdom there in that if you apply the same skills and empathy and approach to your family life and to your business life, there's a lot to
And if
lot.
you can not kill each other, that's a
Yeah, that's it.
plus.
That is it. In business and in your home life, if you can not kill each other,
Uh-huh.
I think I maybe that's the title for the episode. I don't know. Like we'll figure it out. What's next for you, CJ? What's your next thing?
Ooh. Um, I'm currently working on um, a partnership, an eco resort type partnership, and with that, that would enable me to to help refocus our not-for-profit organization in India, the Tiger Center, into an incubation center for ed tech and med tech worldwide because there's 400 million people worldwide who don't have basic health care. And yet we've got
Mhm.
AI and mobile phones and all kinds of stuff. Could we get that together and do something,
Yeah.
please?
Yeah.
Also, in terms of ed tech, um, there's 250 million kids worldwide who don't have a school. And yet, again, more people have access to a mobile phone than clean water. Why isn't there a free or affordable school on the mobile phone supported by some easy social groupings to make so
Yeah.
that people could be in a school?
These are good why questions. There is no reason, right? And yet it seems like we as a species we find it difficult to 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 do these things that are relatively trivial for you and I, but actually not only the right thing to do, but again, they're the right thing to do. like we all have to share this planet. It's better to make it better for everybody. So that sounds like a very
And
exciting
it,
thing.
and
I'm
it,
very excited that you're
and it
doing it.
wasn't even easy for me because my kids wound up with no school too,
Right.
despite living in a beautiful advanced place. So I homeschooled him while I was doing all this other stuff.
Wow.
So
Okay.
couldn't I take that experience and share it with other people, hoping they don't have to have that experience?
Wow. I mean, I'm even more impressed now, CJ, because during the pandemic lockdowns, I attempted to homeschool my then 5-year-old daughter. And, and if I can point, I mean, and 5-year-olds,
Having a hard time.
homeschooling basically like, can you draw a picture with a crayon and read a book when they're 5? But we did end up at one point, I'll always remember this, she would only do the homeschooling if we went in the loft space of our house for some reason. I think it was about control and power or whatever. So we're up there in the dark in the loft, like, for, like, 10 minutes to get her to do anything. From which and my mother was a teacher, so I always had great respect for teachers, but my respect for teachers went through the roof, and my goodness, we were happy when the school opened again. Anyway, that's about me. Our our only non-first question, CJ, which is our final question, is: do you have any final thoughts to share with our audience today?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd like to share something from Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Mhm.
Do not go where the path may lead you. Instead, go where there is no path and leave a trail behind. And
Wow.
you almost had that early on, and I'm like, God, don't say that because I want to finish that.
Well, they are thoughts to live by for sure, and a real theme for our conversation
Yeah.
today. Which, thank you, Dr. CJ Meadows. That's been really inspirational. And thank you for those of you who've watched or listened to First Person, the show where we meet the most interesting people in IT and learn from them what makes them tick by focusing only on their firsts. I've been your host, Matt Egan, and I ask you to enjoy, like, and subscribe wherever you find us. And if you're an interesting person in IT, do let us know. You might be the next first person. So thanks for watching. And CJ, thank you so much.